Montgomery Circuit Court Judge Perry Hooper said he continued today's trial of State Treasurer Melville Allen after talking this morning to the defendant's doctor. Hooper said it was the opinion of Mrs. Allen's doctor that she should not go to trial today. Dr. Ed Young told the judge that his patient was suffering from emotional and physical exhaustion. Judge Hooper hopes to establish a more definite trial pattern by 4 o'clock this afternoon after he receives additional information from Mrs. Allen's doctor. Trial was to begin today on a second indictment against the state treasurer. She is charged with violating the state ethics law by using her office to obtain personal financial gain from the National Bank of Commerce in Birmingham. Mrs. Allen faces sentencing next Thursday on her convictions of May 24th on a 2-count indictment. Each of the counts carries a maximum penalty of $10,000 fine and 10 years in prison. Mrs. Allen must appear personally for sentencing, and at this point it is not known if she will be released from Montgomery Hospital in time to appear here in court. Attorneys for Mrs. Allen have asked the court to set aside the convictions. They claim they have reliable and persuasive evidence that one of the jurors was biased against their client going into the trial. Montgomery District Attorney Jimmy Evans says his office is ready for trial to begin and is getting ready for trial on the remaining indictments against the state treasurer. Reporting from Montgomery Circuit Court, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News. The opinion by Montgomery Circuit Court Judge Perry Hooper was brief. It reads, having discussed the physical condition of Mrs. Allen with Dr. Young, it is the opinion of this court that Mrs. Allen will not be able to stand trial this week. Therefore, the case set for trial today will be continued with a new setting date to be made. Judge Hooper said that decision will come sometime tomorrow. The decision to continue today's trial came after the judge talked twice with Melville Allen's doctor. Dr. Ed Young said that his patient was suffering from emotional and physical exhaustion. Trial was scheduled to begin on a second indictment against the state treasurer. Mrs. Allen is charged with violating the state ethics law by using her office to obtain personal financial gain from the National Bank of Commerce in Birmingham. Mrs. Allen faces sentencing next Thursday on her convictions May 24th on a 2-count indictment. Each of the counts carries a maximum penalty of a $10,000 fine and 10 years in prison. Mrs. Allen must personally appear for sentencing, and at this point it is not known if she will be released from a Montgomery hospital to appear in court. Attorneys for Mrs. Allen have asked the court to set aside the convictions. They claim they have reliable and persuasive evidence that one of the jurors was biased against their client going into the trial. Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans says his office is ready for trial to begin, and he says his office is getting ready for trial on the remaining indictments against the state treasurer. The Montgomery County Grand Jury indicted Mrs. Allen on 5 charges. Reporting from the Montgomery County Circuit Court, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
WSFA TV News looks at the problem of child abuse in Alabama in a special report, Child Abuse, an Epidemic Grown Up, Thursday night at 6:30. In 1875, there were laws to protect animals, but no laws to protect children from abuses. Now, according to expert estimates, 50 to 75,000 American children are sexually abused annually, and another 200,000 are neglected emotionally, physically, and educationally. This is Clark Edwards. Join me as WSFA TV News looks at the problem of child abuse in Alabama in a special report, Child Abuse, an Epidemic Grown Up, Thursday night at 6:30 on WSFA TV 12.
Remind you that this is a sad day. I only hope that someday someone can half fill the shoes of Senator Jim Allen. He was one of the finest members of the United States Senate, and I am sorry that he's not going to be there for many, many reasons. I believe that he extended himself way beyond the call of duty in defending the principles the people of Alabama and a majority of the American people espouse. In fact, I think that and believe that he went beyond the call of duty to the point that it had something to do with the loss of his life at an earlier time than ordinarily it would have happened. I am not discussing any aspects involving the appointment of someone to fill Senator Allen's place at this time in view of the fact that it is not the proper thing to do. I shall do my duty under the Constitution as he would have expected, but I will not discuss that matter at this time.
Governor, under the law, how many days approximately do you have from today and when you must act on it, sir?
I read the constitutional provision some time ago because I read the Constitution occasionally. I believe it's within a period of 60 days or thereafter. Doesn't put it right at 60 days. The next election could well be held on November the 2nd, i.e. the general election this year.
Senator Allen began his Washington career in 1968 with his first election to Congress as senator. He was reelected in 1974. Earlier, in Alabama, his fellow legislators recognized him as a wizard in parliamentary law, and his reputation followed him on to the U.S. Senate. As a member of the Alabama legislature, beginning in 1938, first in the House and then in the Senate, and in his 2 terms as lieutenant governor, Jim Allen sharpened his wits against his colleagues in the legislature and read the rule book time and again. Allen learned practically all there was to know about the time-honored art of filibustering, an art he used with gusto when he reached national office. In Washington, the conservative Alabama senator, having become known as the master of Senate rules, frequently delayed or blocked liberal proposals over the years by sustaining filibusters on the Senate floor. The junior senator used his legislative skill against civil rights and campaign financing legislation, and more recently, against the Panama Canal treaties. Allen was a leader among forces against the 2 canal treaties that were approved by the Senate March 16th and April 18th. The senator was known to refer to the head of the Panamanian government as Dictator Torrijos, a characterization known to have angered the Panamanian leader. Because Allen frequently held the Senate floor for hours on end during debate, his voice became known to millions who listened to the live broadcast of the proceedings on national public radio. He offered few legislative proposals of his own while in office and was probably the most conservative of Senate Democrats in recent years. Allen was born in December 1912 in Gadsden, Alabama. He attended the University of Alabama Law School and did his undergraduate work there. He practiced in Gadsden through his Alabama legislative career and retired in 1968 to devote full time to his duties in the Senate. He served in the Navy from 1943 for 3 years in the Pacific arena. He was a member of the Alabama Senate from 1946 to 1950 and was lieutenant governor for 2 terms, 1951 to 55 and 1963 to 67. Funeral services are scheduled Tuesday morning in Gadsden, in Allen's hometown. This is Ivy Berman, WSFA TV News reporting.
In dropping the cases, Macon County District Attorney Tom Young told the court today, because so many legal loopholes existed in the case, Gregory and his business associates could possibly slip through a trial and that he would be severely handicapped in attempting to prosecute the cases. Young said because no depositors lost money in the bank and because of the complexities in trying the cases, he was reluctantly dropping them. Young then denied that he was pressured by the FDIC to drop the charges.
That is not so.
Have they talked to you about not prosecuting them?
I have talked to them about not prosecuting. The FDIC keeps coming up in this, and I don't know what they have to do with it anyway. This case was started according to the law. The law in Alabama is this. if a bank becomes insolvent and it comes to the attention to the superintendent of banks, under the law, they must report it to the district attorney, who in turn reports it to a grand jury.
So you're saying the FDIC had no influence over you?
No, none whatsoever. I am a native of the 5th Judicial Circuit, Notasulga and Macon County, a part of my home.
Right,
and I'm interested in the welfare of all the people.
Okay, there's one final question. We've been told that there were so many prominent people in Alabama business and politics and outside the state of Alabama. They would have been involved, their names would have been made public, and that was one of the reasons the indictments were dropped.
No, sir.
Gregory attorney Fred Gray of Tuskegee had these comments on reports that the government asked that the cases be dropped.
I do know we issued some time ago subpoenas duces taken to FDIC, to all of the banks involved, to bring all of the records involved that would show the financial condition of this bank, and also the records of several other banks in this state that we believe were in worse financial condition than this bank, and where they were not closed and those persons were not indicted. So we definitely feel that all of that may have had some effect, but I don't know.
This reporter was told by a source close to the case today that had the cases gone to court, 8 to 9 pages of unsecured loans made by the bank would have been revealed in court testimony, and that the names of the 40 to 50 prominent Alabama politicians, as well as national personalities, would have been made public, that they received loans under circumstances other than those offered to the general public when seeking a loan. Even though the charges against Gregory have been dropped here in Macon County, he still faces trial in Montgomery Circuit Court on charges he violated Alabama's banking laws. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, Macon County, Alabama.
We have a totally barrier-free structure inside and outside. It's 50,000 square feet, 2 stories, complete with passenger elevator and freight elevator. There are no curbs. All doors are electronically operated. We have guide rails and rails for canes leading into the building, which pass fragrance gardens, by the way. We have rounded walls. All the office areas are surrounded by 5-foot-high rounded partitions, so that if a blind person does happen to run into one of these surfaces, it will do them no damage because they'll hit the rounded edge. Everything is accessible to a wheelchair. The furniture itself is grouped so that a wheelchair can maneuver easily, as can a blind person with a cane, or without a cane for that matter. The furniture is rounded, it's low, it's all the way to the floor, it's upholstered. There are no lamps to knock over, no ashtrays to knock over. We've tried to eliminate every possible barrier which could prevent just pleasant enjoyment of a public library.
I know the City of Enterprise, the Coffee County Commission, especially the Chiefs Police Association.
That after this venture with the Northwestern Traffic Institute.
1,000 square feet of the training facility itself that includes 10 driving simulators, various classrooms, assistants. I would assume that we'll...
They're traffic courses. I think they've only been in the actual traffic courses for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
What do y'all major?
The first group of Saudis, the 2 captains that are here with me, there are 7 other Saudi Arabian officers from various cities in Saudi Arabia. As of yesterday, we arrived in Enterprise. They're starting their training today. They will be there for 2 weeks. There are also 2 officers there from the United Arab Emirates. They will, like I said, they will graduate in 2 weeks. Approximately the first week in August, we will start another program, and there will be 70 other officers from 70 other Saudi Arabian students who will be officers when they return to Saudi Arabia. Will start their training in Enterprise. Those groups will come 3 weeks at a time. They'll learn how to drive defensively. They'll learn about pursuit driving. They'll learn about maintenance of a police vehicle. They will learn about taking traffic law enforcement actions. They'll learn the proper way to stop violators, to approach violators, to be respectful in their handling of traffic violations, and they'll learn the proper methods in utilizing speed timing devices, particularly a unit that's called VASCAR. So they'll go through 3-week programs, and it's our feeling that with Chief Cooper and his staff that Saudi Arabia will gain much, as will the Traffic Institute, from this relationship.
Lane Wallach carried a 3-stroke lead into the final round of the Woodley Invitational, but Emil Vaughn made up 2 strokes on the front 9 and tied Wallach with a birdie putt on the 12th hole. But Wallach got hot again. He birdied holes 13, 15, and 17, and when Vaughn bogeyed the 15th, Wallach again had a comfortable lead. The hottest man on the course yesterday, though, was Tommy Burt. Burt's 67 was the best round of the tournament. He got 4 consecutive birdies on holes 12, 13, 14, and 15, setting up the birdie on 13 with that approach shot. Burt finished in 3rd place with a 54-hole score of 211. Vaughn's 209 was good for 2nd place. The 3rd time this summer Vaughn has finished 2nd to Wallach. Wallach finished the tournament with a 7-under 206, a record at Woodley. And as Lane Wallach won his 5th tournament of the summer, Les Brown won 3 titles in one day at the Capital City Tennis Classic at Lagoon Park. Brown defeated 2nd-seeded Greg Cooper in the finals of men's singles. He then teamed with John Ed Matheson to win the men's doubles and Allison McAtee to win the mixed doubles. In women's singles, Laura Dozier lost the first set to Julia Jannard, but rallied to win the next 2 sets and the singles title. Other winners yesterday were John Ed Matheson in men's 35 singles, Johnny Jones in women's 35 singles, and Louise Gay and Allison McAtee in women's doubles. Dan O'Brien, WSFA TV Sports.
Its Worth Department. Now almost anybody can drive a bulldozer. And the reason for that is a Montgomery man's invention, a steering wheel which replaces the normal and sometimes cumbersome array of levers and pedals.
Just like you're driving a car.
This is not like power steering, though, is it?
Oh yeah, it's very, very much power steering. Very easy to do. It's more like driving an automobile. There's less controls to fool with. It doesn't take near as much concentration or thought, and it really frees you up for doing a lot of other operations and concentrating more on the blade and pushing the dirt and that sort of thing, rather than operating the machine itself. People who've never driven a bulldozer before just get on it and just take right to it. I think it's something that really improves the efficiency of a bulldozer. And for a farmer who's kind of a part-time operator, he doesn't drive it all the time. It's easy for him to pick it up and learn it, and much easier to master it. And I think he's just going to find it a lot more desirable.
Now, I've never been on a bulldozer in my life. Would I be able to operate this if it didn't have the steering wheel on it, using the gears?
Well, yeah, it wouldn't be as easy. I guarantee you.
Nelson Brungard was insistent that almost anyone could drive a bulldozer with the aid of his new attachment. So to help prove his point, I supplied him with an almost anyone. Oh boy, can I really do this?
Sure.
Now that such machines are easier to handle, truly almost anyone can experience the invigorating ride of an earth mover. As for the economic impact, it appears that Brungart's simplified steering mechanism just might make it possible for a lot more people to doze on the job.
One of the most distinguished visiting professors at Troy State University is C. Northcote Parkinson, author of the internationally acclaimed book Parkinson's Law. Dr. Parkinson's most popular book became a classic almost as soon as it was published and is required reading for businesses and corporations around the world. But on this particular visit to Troy State University, I talked with Parkinson about an American phenomena known as Watergate.
What is your opinion and what is the common opinion in your country of Watergate?
One of boredom. I don't know whether I was entirely typical of that, but I have recollections of endless arguments of a moralistic tone as to whether President Nixon knew of the cover-up on this date, or whether, in fact, he'd really known about it 3 weeks earlier. And these were subjects of which I found difficult to get excited about, because my own conclusion at the beginning was he either knew or he decided not to know. And for me, the difference between those two things is not very important. But to me, the important thing was something which hardly was touched upon by David Frost and other heroes of television who charged in on this subject and were trying to decide whether the president had let the people down. And to me, the interesting thing was a failure in organization. And I would have been interested to hear about a reorganization which would have prevented that sort of thing happening again.
You're speaking of an organization now. What particular organization are you speaking of?
I'm speaking of the presidential office, the relationship of the president, his cabinet, the civil service, and the rest, the whole system of administration. And this system, as it stands, is one that rests an appalling weight on one man and requires of him, it would seem, a minimum of 25 hours work a day. And I should like to have heard, rather than moralist musings about Nixon, I should like to have heard someone attempting a job description of the presidential office and to try to decide whether anyone could possibly carry out the duties that are assigned to that office.
How would have your government handled a Watergate scandal?
I remind you how it did handle it. We had an affair of Suez in the early days, and Anthony Eden made a mistake, we think, in ordering, in effect, an Anglo-French invasion of Egypt, then panicked halfway and made a second mistake, which was to pull out. Having gone in fact, he should have gone on, but admittedly it was a mistake to have gone in the first instance. And at that point he had a nervous breakdown, and we dispensed with him and found another prime minister. He might have been better, but at least he hadn't been directly involved. And so we could come back to the conference table, and when they said, "How wicked of you to invade Egypt," our representatives could say, "We didn't invade Egypt, that was our predecessors. They were sacked, you see," and begin the discussion with relative equality. The American system makes it impossible to sack the president, and there have been circumstances when it might have been convenient to do so.
Why do you think we have this basic difference between your government and ours?
Well, you got stuck with a constitution which was designed for a very different society at a very different period of history. And it met the needs, the peculiar needs of what we sometimes call the revolting colonies, along the eastern seaboard, and the same Constitution now has to do in very different circumstances, and it's very rigid. Some other countries, and ours included, have been able to reform themselves, reorganize themselves according to the immediate needs of the day.
We've heard a lot about the cost of living in England. We've heard about labor problems. What is the quality of life in England like today?
The quality of life is probably better than ever before. In terms of a standard of living, it has to be accounted as a prosperous country. They never had it so good, in a way. The penalty is that the country tends not to be paying its way. People are paying themselves more than they earn, more than they ought to have, and the end of this, one may guess, could be unfortunate.
What might that end be?
Well, of course, the immediate risk until recently was of inflation at a rate. It could run up to 20–25% inflation, which is more or less suicidal for industry, commerce, and so on. You can't live with that, really.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, before we go, we have a short but fitting tribute to one of Alabama's greatest statesmen, the late Senator Jim Allen.
Thank you.
Vice President Mondale was the first of the large contingent from Washington to arrive at the First Methodist Church in Gadsden. Vice President Mondale was met and escorted into the church by Governor George Wallace. The Secret Service requires no more than a dozen senators can travel together, so that members of the Senate that arrived in Gadsden today came in 4 buses from the airport. They arrived about 15 minutes apart. Nationally notable among the senators were Howard Baker of Tennessee, Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts, Alabama's senior Senator John Sparkman, Charles Percy of Illinois, George McGovern of South Dakota, and former presidential candidate Henry Scoop Jackson. While several hundred friends were able to be inside the church for the 1 hour and 15-minute service, 500 to 600 more endured the heat of Alabama's midday to listen to the service over public address speakers on the outside of the Methodist Church. In addition to the prayers of the chaplain of the Senate, 2 fellow senators honored the late Alabama senator, Virginia Senator Harry Byrd and former Senator Sam Erwin.
He gave to the people of Alabama and to the Senate of the United States far more than he received. His service was unselfish. His Senate hours were long and difficult. And when the Senate was not in session, he was out amongst the people of Alabama. He was indeed a servant of the people, giving without limit his time, his talent, and his health. But his sacrifices were not without reward. In my many conversations with him, I am convinced that what meant the most to him, aside from his wonderful wife, Mary Ann, was the feeling in his heart that he had the confidence and the support and the admiration of the people of Alabama. What more could a person ask?
He desired above all things for America to endure as the land of the free and the home of the brave. For this reason, he supported free enterprise rather than bureaucratic regimentation, fiscal integrity rather than deficit financing, military might rather than international appeasement, and freedom rather than tyranny over the minds and affairs of the people. He never sold eternal truth to serve the transitory needs of the political hour, or bowed the pregnant hinges of the knees that political thrift might follow political phoning. Since he carried his own sovereignty in his own mind and heart, and was never willing to follow a great multitude to do what he believed to be ill for his country, he stood with the minority and suffered defeat in some legislative battles. But the eloquence he exhibited and the valor he displayed on these occasions illustrated this sublime truth: defeat may serve as well as victory to shake the soul and let the glory out. In this moment of sorrow, I rejoice to remember I revealed my appraisal of Jim Allen as a man and as a senator while he was still with us. He and I fought side by side on the Senate floor on many occasions for causes we held dear. After one of these events, he honored me by asking me for an autographed picture. I gave him a picture bearing this inscription in my handwriting: "If I ever have to stand with one man at Armageddon and battle for the Lord, I want that man to be Senator Jim Allen of Alabama."
Graveside services were held following the 15-block processional to Forest Cemetery. The 65-year-old Democrat from Alabama, who became a legend for his knowledge of Senate rules, was buried after a 21-gun salute by a squad of Navy crewmen. The flag-draped coffin was surrounded by countless roses and throngs of people. Clark Edwards, WSFA TV News, Gadsden, Alabama.
This is where it ended, a high-speed chase in excess of 80 miles an hour with gunshots exchanged between the male occupant of the car and law enforcement officials. The chase began when police arrived at a robbery call in South Montgomery. There, police saw a black male apparently taking a black female hostage. The chase moved to I-65 South, where just north of the Lowndes County line, a shotgun was thrown out of the car after it had been used several times in pursuit with police. Police say the car's driver then began firing a pistol. The vehicle then turned on to 31 South, where a state trooper fired a shot that disabled the car and flipped it on its side, 20 miles from where the chase began.
After I caught up with him, and he refused to slow down and stop, I got in behind him, and he then tried to wreck my car by slamming on his brakes and changing lanes and tried to hook my bumpers, what I thought he was doing, trying to wreck me. Then I fired 2 shots at his left rear tire. He laid down the seat and ran off the road.
The car caught fire momentarily, but the flames were quickly extinguished by fire officials. The hostage was reported in good condition. The alleged kidnapper was then taken to Montgomery for booking. It was a situation that could have been a lot worse, but with the cooperation of several law enforcement agencies, it came to a quick end. On Highway 31 south of Montgomery, Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
The Alabama legislature in the early 40s passed a bill that would attract industries. The industries did not have to pay ad valorem taxes. The bill was designed to bring in jobs in the form of big industries in Alabama because of the job situation that existed at that time. Here in the state, tax assessors and state tax officials say the situation has gotten out of hand and everybody's getting into the act. They say that many multi-million-dollar businesses and churches are exempt from ad valorem taxes, and the list grows every year with no end in sight. The officials say the exemptions leaves Alabama's property tax burden on private citizens and small business operators. The head of the ad valorem tax division explains the situation.
Well, this past year, about $226 million, I believe, for machinery equipment in industrial plants, and about $53-some million for buildings. That's new plants and expansions of existing plants.
These were new exemptions
granted to industry.
by the Alabama legislature.
Well, the Alabama legislature provides the law. They are exemptions approved by the Department of Revenue.
In 1977, we understand that $140 million in ad valorem taxes were collected. How much was exempted?
Well, I could estimate it for you this way. If exemptions were not there, you'd probably collect twice that amount. So,
$280 million?
Assuming the millages were not reduced. But the tax base is reduced by these amounts of these exemptions, and the exemptions would amount to probably as much as is now taxed, in my estimation.
People who have some power in the legislature, are they the ones that get exemptions?
Well, I don't know why the legislature grants exemptions, but the people have to get bills passed, acts passed the legislature to get the exemption. It has to be an amendment to the existing revenue code, or it has to be a special act of the legislature. Sure.
Does the average homeowner, the average worker, pay more in ad valorem taxes than the industry people and special interest groups?
Well, not dollar-wise, but percentage-wise, possibly, because some industrial plants are not taxed at all, because they have exemptions that don't require them to be taxed.
Do you think you'll ever see a bill where the average man would be exempted from paying ad valorem taxes so that he would be attracted to staying in the state of Alabama?
Well, I don't expect that, no.
But this is typically the situation for industry, is that?
Well, some industries, large industries, of course, it's an inducement for them to come to the state of Alabama, one inducement. I'm not saying it's the main inducement, but it's certainly an inducement to come to the state if they enjoy the exemptions from taxes.
Tax officials who've been watching the exemption situation for the last 20 years said it appears that there will be no relief in sight, even though 1979 will bring a new ad valorem tax base. But they say unless John Q. Public gets somebody in the legislature to have his exemptions raised, he'll end up bearing the brunt of the ad valorem taxes in the state of Alabama. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the State Revenue Department.
Perhaps the greatest parliamentarian ever to sit in the United States Senate. He said that Allen had an unfailingly courteous statesman whose dedication to the Senate was surpassed only by his dedication to the people of Alabama. Senate Minority Leader Robert Byrd said Allen commanded respect with his mastery of the rules and his courtesy on the floor. State Senator Wendell Mitchell of Laverne, who served as Allen's chief aide for 4 years, said, and this is a quote, "The polls show Allen was the most popular person to hold public office, certainly during my lifetime." He said further the senator was a personal tribute to Alabama.
He was one of the closest people to you. He was not a good speaker. Now, that came across in his